London, a major imperial capital founded by the Romans, with 20 centuries of history and a catalog of cultural breakthroughs. So as a visitor, you'd expect what? Majestic buildings, grand plazas, quaint narrow streets, cozy cafes, amazing views, breathtaking architecture. Then you arrive, walk around, and you can't help wondering, as in, excuse me, I don't mean to be rude, but what the hell happened here exactly? What are all these tuna cans, glass beehives, motorcycle cylinder blocks? Where are, the buildings, the magnificent ancient churches, the palaces, the splendid residential blocks, the historic entertainment venues? Where did it all go? Few people have ever called London a beautiful city. Here's what William Morris, a Londoner, had to say about it. We are the caretakers of these buildings for future generations. What are we doing with our heritage? We are destroying the art of the people, replacing it with the heartless uniformity of the machine. This was written, pay attention, this was written in the year of our Lord 1877. However, prior to World War II, London was quite respectable looking. Small wonder, since it was, after all, the capital of a vast maritime empire. You felt that the moment you arrived, regardless of what Morris thought about it. Well, years passed, World War I came and went. A number of socialist revolutions occurred here and there around the globe. Lots of people were killed, imprisoned, or starved to death then and thereafter, following which the powers that be, upon some reflection, decided that one great war was not enough. So they might as well have another one. Japan occupied Manchuria, Germany occupied a chunk of Poland, the Soviet Union occupied the rest of Poland and the Baltic states, England got involved even more than usual, and the fun started in earnest. Then came the Blitz. The bombings flattened a significant portion of London. After each raid, bulldozers cleared the debris, filling in basements and paving over the ruins with asphalt to keep up, morale, I guess. When the war ended, with the country bankrupt and the treasury empty, a temporary solution was found for the 200,000 people who were left homeless. Prefab houses built from surplus wartime materials like aluminum, timber, and asbestos cement. The kits would arrive on site and be assembled right there and then. William Levitt took note. Those makeshift shacks were projected to last about 10 years. By then, the government promised the city would be brushed up, rebuilt, and restored. They may have meant it. I don't know. They must have gotten distracted by more important matters or something. All that brushing up and restoring, it never materialized. Many historic centers of European cities were meticulously restored after World War II. Some were rebuilt even under Soviet rule, like St. Petersburg, then called Leningrad, or Warsaw, Poland, and others in the post-Soviet era, like Dresden. England's movers and shakers, after pondering for some time over a cup of tea, and then pondering some more over more tea and a little scotch, perhaps they chose a different route, studying the very heart of London with utterly repulsive, pointedly hostile, astoundingly vulgar pseudo-architectural guano. Imagine that in a country whose elite had dreaded vulgarity for nearly 2 centuries. Mind you, this wasn't what the public wanted. In a democratic country, everything was planned and executed by unelected officials working in cahoots with the central government ministers. There was no referendum on it. To be sure, objections were raised, but they were ignored. To this day, heritage groups like Historic England continue to protest, to no avail. You could say, like, hey, what else is new? The city was hijacked by unprincipled bureaucrats hell-bent on lining their pockets. So they have no taste. How is that different from any other country? Well, let me posit that in England, the problem goes much, much deeper. Deeper than tea, soccer, or the hatred of the French across the Channel. Imagine that. It goes back to Henry VIII. He asked the Pope to annul his marriage. The Pope said, yeah, right, dream on, tiger. So the king broke with Rome and made himself head of the Church of England.
It was a bit more complicated than that.
I know. Some other time, perhaps.
Okay.
Henry's daughter, Bloody Mary, also known as Mary I, upon assuming the throne, she, a devout Catholic, chased many prominent Protestants out of the country. They fled to Geneva, where they pounced on the ideas of a Frenchman named John Calvin.
A Frenchman?
Yes, indeed. His real name was Jehan Calvin, and he was French. He was a determinist.
Explain?
Determinism is this cute theological theory stating that even before God created Adam and Eve, he had already handpicked the select few from various future places and epochs, the select few destined for salvation. The rest of humanity was destined for hell, and there was absolutely nothing anyone could do about it. The scientific version of determinism, once championed by Laplace, was summed up by Einstein in the phrase, God does not play dice. Now, this produced this agonizing internal conflict. You had no idea whether you personally were one of the chosen or not. So you made an effort, desperately hoping that your success and good deeds were, well, undeniable evidence that you were one of the chosen.
What about the camel and the eye of a needle?
There was a workaround of sorts. They believed that inherited wealth, the kind of wealth you hadn't worked for and therefore did not deserve, was the type of wealth Jesus meant when he said that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. And if you just worked hard enough and you were good at what you did, then it was all justified. It was a sign that God, in fact, had chosen you.
Clever.
Very clever, yes. Under Elizabeth I, the exiles returned to England and began spreading their Calvinist ideas. The intellectuals over at Oxford, they loved it, for whatever reason. Queen Elizabeth had to live with it. She may have resented the movement, but she resented Catholic Spain more. So Puritanism was born and was taking root rapidly across merry old England. Their first order of business, to show themselves and others that they were, of course, on the chosen list, was to eschew anything viewed as Catholic excess, Catholic luxury, or Catholic beauty for that matter. Rome was the enemy and austerity was the name of the game. French and Italian Baroque architecture, excessive. Tone it down. Visual arts, Catholic vanity. Ignore it. Music, indecent. Get rid of it, except on holidays. Now, mind you, I am not saying that the English suddenly ceased building or painting or composing. The elite did not go all Savonarola on the population. Nor am I saying that simple structures cannot be beautiful. Christ Church in Philadelphia is among my favorites. It's perfectly in keeping with those Puritan ideas. Its quiet beauty takes a bit of time to begin to appreciate, but there it is. It's breathtaking. But the English elite did stop taking seriously almost any endeavor whose function was to enrich our lives on earth, aesthetically speaking, with two very notable exceptions: literature and science. From that point on, the general English attitude towards anything visual or auditory was indifferent, bordering on dismissive, as in, who cares, it's just music, or who cares, it's just architecture. Painting is just a craft. Painters are craftsmen, not artists. Art is a continental thing, a Catholic thing. Let them all go to hell. And so England became a nation of writers and scientists. And we have to admit, they were highly successful in that. The English, I mean.
Shakespeare and Newton?
And hundreds of other authors, scientists, engineers, philosophers, economists. Absolutely. And the King James Bible, it may not be perfect, but it is the best translation of the Bible to date into English or any other language.
Adam Smith?
Sure, Adam Smith, Michael Faraday. Nor am I saying that the country didn't produce great architects or artists, even though their greatest composer is a German immigrant. English-born geniuses did come, some of them of Irish persuasion, and they did build and paint. But every single one of them faced numerous horrific obstacles throughout their lives. Sir Joshua Reynolds, the co-founder of the Royal Academy, desperately tried to drag English society into respecting the visual arts as a noble pursuit rather than a mere craft. He spent his career in a state of chronic depression, exhausted from fighting an elite that viewed art purely as a transactional commodity, which is to say portraits of themselves and their sweaty horses. Okay, so I didn't want to mention him, but I guess I have to. This story would be incomplete without him, right?
Let me guess. Oliver Cromwell?
Oliver Cromwell. Okay, he was the great-great-grandson of a brewer, something the elite, old and new, kept periodically reminding him of, because they were kind and tolerant and progressive, and there was absolutely nothing at all wrong with being descended from a brewer. His wealth came mostly from farming, a notch more respectable. He became a member of the House of the Rabble, Commons. When the first civil war, Parliament against the king, broke out, he quickly rose through the ranks. When the second civil war broke out, he was pretty much in charge. He defeated the king, Charles I, and had him executed, whereupon he became the de facto dictator. He led military campaigns against Ireland and Scotland, annexing both. The crown was offered to him. He declined. He said kings did not fit into the philosophy of Puritanism. And they were all like, what? And he's like, that's right, we don't need kings. So they gave him the title of Lord Protector instead. His government closed all theaters, banned sports, and criminalized swearing. Okay, and traveling on Sundays. Upon his request, Parliament explicitly banned Christmas, Easter, and Whitsun, replacing them with strict monthly days of fasting. He divided England into military districts ruled by generals who acted as literal moral police force. He heavily promoted the Calvinist belief in providence, the idea that his military and political victories were direct proof, evidence of God's divine favor. The radical strictness of his so-called rule of the saints did cause a public backlash, but it was kept down. I guess I have to say this. This role of the saints, cosmically speaking, is distinctly anti-Christian. And second, it's thoroughly authoritarian, which is to say it's all about lip service, virtue signaling, and towing the party line, with ideology replacing not just religion, but all forms of civic expression. The good news is about spiritual joy. The rule of the saints was utterly joyless. When the monarchy was restored in 1660 under Charles II, the public seemed to embrace this like mass rejection of strict Puritan rules. Yeah, but absolutely the core Calvinist ideas remained permanently woven into the fabric of English culture for centuries. Which is to say that the visual arts, architecture, and music continued to be viewed as matters of secondary importance. The popularity in England of Handel, Van Dyck, and later on Verdi, Wagner, and even Puccini, it can be justified like this. Yes, it's all very nice, but they're foreigners. They're allowed. It's okay for us to appreciate their input, but we are not going to give the same measure of respect to our own contributors because, it's just not our thing, not an English thing. It doesn't play to our strengths. Literature and science, those are ours. Art, music, opera, architecture. Of course, the Germans and the Italians and even the French are better at it, which is why they are going to hell. Okay, so we don't have Baroque per se. We have our Georgian, Edwardian, and whatever built environment, and that's quite sufficient for us. Let's get back to architecture. One name springs immediately to mind.
Christopher Wren?
Yes, Christopher Wren. In 1666, the Great Fire of London destroyed two-thirds of the city, give or take. Wren offered a plan for rebuilding the city, a masterclass in Baroque urban planning with radial avenues, grand plazas, and a dominant St. Paul's Cathedral. The plan was promptly rejected by the elite. They wanted their exact property lines back. They had no use for civic grandeur. They didn't want anything pretty. Because, that's not us. We're not French. We don't do that. In other words, Wren was an expensive nuisance to them. Wren's pupil, Nicholas Hawksmoor, lacked social standing to defend his projects. Despite all the Puritanism, the English were and still are highly sensitive to social standing, like everyone else outside of India, except perhaps more so. Hawksmoor's 6 magnificent London churches, such as Christ Church Spitalfields and St. George's Bloomsbury, could have been masterpieces. But the commission for building 50 new churches, that was actually its name, they constantly slashed Hawksmoor's budgets, forcing him into compromises. Then a political appointee named William Benson replaced Wren as Surveyor General. To make room for Benson's spectacularly incompetent brother, who needed a sinecure, the elite stripped Hawksmoor of his official posts, all of them. He died crippled by gout, feeling deeply undervalued, following which the elites dismissed his buildings as heavy and barbarous for over a century.
John Soane?
Sir John Soane spent his entire career in a state of high-strung nervous exhaustion, standing up to the elite that viewed his projects with overt hostility. He was hauled before parliamentary committees to justify minor cost discrepancies. His work was perceived as needless luxury. Decades later, the 20th century British banking elite would demolish his masterpiece, the Bank of England, destroying his life's work.
John Nash?
John Nash. If London has any residual sense of urban flow today, it is because of Nash's work on Regent Street, Regent's Park, and Carlton House Terrace. But he was only allowed to build it because he was a personal favorite of the Prince Regent. When the royal benefactor died, the establishment turned on Nash. The Treasury hounded him relentlessly over the rising costs of rebuilding Buckingham Palace. At 77 years old, while recovering from a stroke, Nash was dismissed from the Board of Works. Parliament launched investigation after investigation, treating him like a common criminal rather than the man who had quite literally given London its elegant West End. He spent his final years in forced retirement, trying to defend his reputation from a culture that viewed his projects as an expensive, un-English embarrassment.
Augustus Pugin?
Augustus Pugin was the tragic hero of the 19th century Gothic revival. He believed that architecture was a moral force, that a beautiful Gothic-style Christian city could physically heal the spiritual wounds of the Industrial Revolution. He designed the dizzying, exquisite interiors of the Palace of Westminster, from the House of Lords to the details of Big Ben's Tower. The elite didn't buy into his philosophy. They just wanted a trendy, expensive, ornamental Gothic skin to wrap around their bureaucratic parliament building. The despair of watching his spiritual vision reduced to a mere vanity decoration for the wealthy destroyed him. At 40 years old, worked to the bone and suffering a complete mental breakdown, Pugin was committed to Bedlam Asylum, where he died shortly after. Yes, London could have been a dramatically different city, if not for the combination of Puritan sentiment and the bankers' greed. Perhaps. And yet, up until World War II, it still looked presentable. Following the war, the decision was made not to restore the historic center, but to pave it over and welcome with open arms the ugly growth movement, which goes by many names today while producing largely the same result. This vulgar and nightmarish built environment that no person with even the most rudimentary good taste would call beautiful or attractive. It was Puritan sentiment on steroids. The space needed to be built up, and no one in charge gave harmony, history, vibrancy, or the human scale a second thought. You know, it's just buildings. Who cares what they look like? It's all just visual anyway. Get over it. Look, in order to build anything in London, you'd need to get an undergraduate degree studying the basics of design. You then would have to work in an architecture firm to get hands-on training. You'd have to complete a master's degree or postgraduate diploma studying advanced design. Okay. You'd then work at least one more year in a firm. You'd have to take a final test in professional practice and law, following which you'd register with the Architects Registration Board, ARB. That's a minimum of 7 years, during which you'd familiarize yourself with every possible architectural school of thought of the past 3,000 years. Willy-nilly, you'd get a substantial dose of various movements: Greco-Roman, Romanesque, Byzantine, Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque, Neoclassicism, Beaux-Arts, Art Nouveau, Art Deco. All that, so you could build this. At this point, thoughtful observers like you and me might begin to entertain the possibility that these people are lunatics. Is there something we're missing here? Okay, so you, a well-meaning visitor to London, you go ahead and feast your eyes on Westminster Abbey. It was consecrated in 1065, a year before the Norman Conquest, and subsequently every British monarch, starting with William the Conqueror, was crowned here. It was torn down and rebuilt in the French Gothic style by King Henry III, and the crowning resumed. The twin western towers were designed and completed by Nicholas Hawksmoor in 1745. So you look at those and then you turn to your right and you see this. And then you turn around and you see this right across the square. That would be the Queen Elizabeth II Center. The ribbon was cut by Her Majesty in 1985. Why? Let's take a walk along the embankment. By the way, if you wish to hear more of these stories with supporting visuals on topics other than architecture, please subscribe to my Patreon. It consists entirely of videos on stuff like movies, science, art, music, economics, history, culture, and many more. The link is in the description below. It is the best way to support this channel. Thank you for your support. Now that would be the Palace of Westminster, the seat of England's government, the House of Lords, the House of the Rabble, Commons, all that. Pretty cool, isn't it? Until you turn your eyes to the left and see that. There's a bit of confusion about which bridge is in fact London Bridge. So this one is called Tower Bridge. Tower, not London. It is the most recognizable one in London, yes. Existing in perfect harmony with this architectural manure.
Harmony? What harmony? Where's the harmony?
I was being sarcastic.
Oh,
Each of those structures, the shard, the cylinder block, the triplets, the onion or potbelly stove, if you will, repulsive, yes, clearly at enmity with men and God, yes, but also kind of comical. A tragic comedy of sorts. For instance, the onion is in fact the former city hall. The idea was that because it looks transparent at certain angles, it would symbolize the government's transparency. Yes, you heard me right. Government's transparency. Hey, you want to see what the new City Hall looks like? Here it is. Now the triplets. They are in fact residential buildings. The argument that I often hear is that people have to live somewhere. Quick, efficient, we're solving the housing crisis. Nicely solved. If you walk by them after sunset, you'll notice that most of the windows are dark. They're condos, with the prices ranging from 3 to 15 million pounds sterling. Nobody lives in them. They are an investment, like those pencil towers in New York. And this is a cafe with people snacking, enjoying this breathtaking view. Here's another great view. This is the actual London Bridge today. Not the one from the nursery rhyme and not the Victorian one, because the one built by John Rennie kept crumbling or sinking or whatever. They sold it to an American enthusiast for a couple of $1 million in the 1960s, who then dismantled it brick by brick and shipped it to the Arizona desert via the Panama Canal. It is now a tourist attraction there. Here's what it looks like.
hey, as an American, I say he saved that bridge.
Hey, as an American, I can't be held responsible for the actions of every Philistine out there, American or otherwise. Nor can I be held responsible for how the English treat their country's architectural history.
Okay,
Check this out. Yes, this is the actual London Bridge as it is today. Enjoying the view? Highly romantic, isn't it? And here's the ultimate symbol. Look, Roman foundations, 2,000 years of history, the soaring Gothic stone of the Abbey, the majestic dome of St. Paul's, the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, and yet the defining silhouette on almost every travel brochure, news broadcast, or postcard of London is this Ferris wheel. This is just pathetic. It was erected in 1999 as a temporary celebration for the turn of the millennium. The public and the tourists loved it because of the view, because there isn't much else to look at on that stretch of the South Bank, except for the concrete slabs of the South Bank Center. The lease was quietly made permanent in 2003. In a city that once commissioned Christopher Wren to build 50 magnificent stone churches and John Nash to craft elegant boulevards, the ultimate monument is a Ferris wheel. A Ferris wheel. The ultimate symbol of London. By the way, a single adult ticket will run you £39. That's $50 in American currency, give or take. This royal throne of kings, this sceptered isle, this precious stone set in a silver sea.
Richard II, Act 2, Scene 1, by William Shakespeare.
Yes, indeed, English literature is quite powerful. I'm Ricky Vernio coming to you from Brooklyn, New York, and I'll see you soon.